Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus. The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
Good morning, folks. Nice to see you. I just felt during the break, I was a bit like, I could do with a drink. So conveniently went out and got myself a coffee. And then I was rightly told by one of the cafe team members, whose name will remain nameless to protect their dignity and identity, that I should have brought my own coffee mug. Rightly chastised. So and maybe serves as a reminder, bring your own coffee cups if you can, that would be great. And do what Chantel's doing and Roy's doing. Hold it up, Roy. Oh, and others, look at you. Oh, everyone's all proud as punch. There we go. So the coffee tastes good, by the way. It's the right strength. Paul, you know how to make the coffee, son. Anyway, you're so welcome. If you're a guest here this morning, especially welcome. And just to say, we have been on a journey since September, trawling through, that sounds a long way, adventuring through the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, the shortest of the Gospels. Began this in September, took a break around Christmas. Then in the last number of weeks, what we've been doing is kind of the director's cut. As we've been journeying through the chapters, they were just so long that we had to miss bits out. But conveniently, we've kind of dipped in and kind of gone back a little bit. But you'll be glad to know, church, we are back on track today. We are chapter 11. And conveniently, over the next number of weeks, we'll lead right the way through to chapter 16 on Easter Sunday, which is the resurrection. So with a plan of action, that's where we are, that's where we're going, that's where we're journeying. Special points. Who's brought their Mark's Gospel? Come on, hold it up. Yes. There's more of those than there are your own coffee cups. Anyway, before we dive in, I thought what I'd show you, I found this in all the stuff when I'm researching things and trying to understand the scriptures myself before I stand up and talk about it. I thought I would highlight this for some of you. And this basically is a map of where it all happened. And all of you can't quite see it there, but there's different colors, and they all represent geographically where all the events took place. And all you do with your mouse or your finger, you hover over the number and you press on it, and it tells you what it was, what happened, and where in the four Gospels that you'll find it. It's really, really brilliant. And it is in chronological order of time over the 3 years. Really, really brilliant. Great resource. You probably can't see, but the purple dot at the bottom says Holy Week. And the purple dot, if you can see it, is right at the very bottom, the south in Judea there, which is obviously highlighting Jerusalem. That's really where we pick things up, in a village called Bethany, which is about 5 miles outside of Jerusalem. Bethany is the place where Jesus went to raise Lazarus from the dead. It is also the place where he's had this incredible meal with Lazarus' family after he's raised him from the dead. And it's during that time that Mary cracks open the alabaster jar and pours this perfume over Jesus in preparation for what is to come. So we're in chapter 11. There are 4 significant, distinct bits to the chapter, and we're going to look at the first 3, which is the triumphant entry, the cursing of a fig tree, and the clearing of the temple. So that's where we are, and that's where we're going. Before we read the first bit, the triumphant entry, Mark 11, verses 1 to 11. 3 weeks ago, Hannah Ritchie, she spoke just brilliantly. And in the preceding chapter to it, he's on this journey with his disciples. Jesus, knows what's going on, what's going to happen. And for the 3rd time, he tells explicitly his disciples what's going to happen. He tells them explicitly that he is going to suffer and he's going to die. And still the disciples, the penny is not dropping for them. They do not think that this is part of the plan. Yes, they're beginning to believe and understand who he is, but surely not this. And they can't quite grapple with it. So here we are between Bethany and Jerusalem. Let's read. As they approached Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives. Jesus sends two of his disciples. He says, go into that village, and as you enter it, you'll find a colt tied up. No one's ever ridden it. Untie it, bring it here. One would think that's theft. I don't really know what to say, to be honest. Perhaps they knew. Sure, they just borrowed it. Anyway, the Lord needs it, if anyone asks. The Lord needs it. So I guess permission was granted. And we'll send it back here shortly. They went and found a colt outside in the street, tied up the doorways. They untied it. Some people standing there said, what are you doing? They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. When they brought the colt to Jesus, they threw their cloaks over it. He sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others spread branches that they had cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and then followed shouted, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the heaven. Jesus entered Jerusalem. He went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything. And since it was already late, he went back out to Bethany with the 12. So they're in Bethany. They decide, they embark on this journey. They go, they get the colt, the donkey. It's never been ridden before. They put cloaks on it. They go before them. There's this incredible anticipation that Jesus is coming. Jesus has risen Lazarus from the dead. There is this overwhelming fever pitch anticipation that he's coming to town. News about this and news about him has spread like wildfire. And there are thousands of pilgrims from miles around have already gathered to this one place, to Jerusalem, to celebrate the Passover festival, the first of the 3 festivals throughout the year that they would celebrate. And there's this anticipation. Could this be the one? Could this be the one that we've prayed for, that we've longed for, that the scriptures have led us to believe that Messiah will come? And will he come to overthrow us from the oppression of Rome? Because that was their understanding or their belief of what Messiah would come to do. Passover. As we know, many of us maybe not so. I'm teaching my year 8s here in the school about the Prince of Egypt. It's been brilliant. We've spent 4 one-hour lessons watching the Prince of Egypt. It's fantastic. It's taken me ages to prepare that stuff. But nonetheless, I hit pause lots and I tell them all about it. And trying to get our young people to understand what it was all about. It was about the oppression of Egypt to the God's special people, and how they took the lamb and how they sacrificed, and they took some of the blood and they painted it over the doorway. And when the angel of death came, he passed over and would not go in and kill the firstborn. Most of us know that. Most of us understand that. Some of us maybe not so. And so here, Passover, they come to celebrate what God had done in the past, but what God was going to do in the present and what God was going to do in the future for us. That Jesus himself would be the Lamb who takes away the sins of the world. Instead of the blood of a lamb painted on doorposts, it would come. Our relationship and our freedom from slavery, not slavery to Rome, but slavery to sin, to defeat the greater enemy, which is Satan, would come through Jesus' special blood shed upon the cross, which was to come. Now, the timing of his arrival was deliberate. It was 4 days before Passover began. And Jesus was very deliberate about that. He was very intentional about that. And the reason being is part of the Jewish, what's the word I'm looking for? Tradition, thank you, was that those that could afford a lamb would purchase a lamb, and they would bring the lamb into their homes, almost like a pet. And on that day, they would sacrifice the lamb and do exactly what I've just described there. Jesus deliberately, 4 days before, shows up. And he shows up on a donkey. This triumphant entry is Jesus' first public discourse of his messiahship. Prior to this, as we know, as we read through the scriptures, we hear Jesus' words. Wherever he goes, he draws a crowd. His following becomes greater and greater, and he's trying to desperately downplay it. Just go, but don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. But here we read the first point when Jesus himself is publicly declaring in great fashion in amongst thousands and thousands of people, I am who I am. Scholars who of Mark's gospel would say this: the messianic secret has now been unfolded. And as we have said time and time again during this study and this looking at Mark's gospel, Mark is deliberately inviting us, the reader, to see and to answer the question, who is Jesus? This finale, as he rides into town, the people are going nuts. They take their cloaks, they lay them on the ground. They've cut these branches, they've brought them out. They're laying as a way of paying homage to who he is as he comes. They're singing, they're rejoicing. They're using the word Hosanna, which we sang this morning, which is a Hebrew word that means save, which later was a word that was turned into a word of praise. And we sing that, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They're quoting Psalm 118. Matthew, in his account of this very same story, he writes and he quotes the prophet Zechariah, and he says this: say to daughter Zion, see your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Which leads to the final point of this. Why come on a donkey? Why? Jesus would have been to Jerusalem many times before. He would have celebrated Passover several times before in that holy city of Jerusalem. Why this time would he come on a donkey? Twofold. One, what I've already said. He's publicly declaring and saying he is the Messiah. He is the king. And when a king comes to town, and this is the second point, a king comes to town, they come on a four-legged creature. One would think, well, gosh, a king in battle would come, a king coming to a town in that region at that time traditionally would come. Usually, if they were coming in battle, they would come on a horse. But if they come in peace, they come on a donkey. And Jesus, again, is choosing this. He knows the cultural understanding. He comes to Jerusalem in peace, coming as the king. But that peace, as we know, was the peace that he brings, but it wasn't peaceful over the coming days. And that's what we will look at over the next number of weeks together. How do we apply anything of this? There's lots of things that we could look at. But ponder in our lives, when have we thought in our lives that things would go a certain way? You see, Jesus knew what he was up to, but he probably was the only one who knew. The disciples there, they're going nuts too. They're like, yes, we're on the right team here. The people, as they gather, there's this anticipation. He's come to set us free, but not in the way that they imagined. And I wonder in our lives, how many times do we think things are going to go a certain way? We set out on a particular route and a set journey. We perhaps have heard the Lord and we have embarked on something only for it to be something else or turn out in a different way. How many times do we think we know what's going on, and yet God, in his grace and his mercy and in our humility, begin to see things and hear things in a different way as things unfold? Or perhaps another question to consider or ponder in response to what we're seeing and hearing and learning this morning is, how have we tried to make a different king out of Jesus in our own lives? How have we, in our own human understanding and our own desires, tried to make Jesus in our lives to be a different king in the way in which we connect and we interact with him? He will not be any other king other than the king that he really is. And it requires us in all humility to submit ourselves to him in complete and utter surrender. We conclude this first bit by noting that on arrival, he comes to town and the place that he goes to is deliberate. He's intentional about this. He walks into the temple courts and we read, he looked around at everything, but since it was late, he goes back the 5-mile journey to Bethany with the 12. They make the 5-mile journey back. And Bethany is the place where he spends his days, literally toing and froing each day, because each day, as we read over the next number of weeks, he goes back to Jerusalem for something else and for something else. And it's absolutely cracker what happens. I love it. And we will look at it in more detail. So anyway, diving into the second passage. So after the triumphant entry, he goes back the following day. Let's read. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it's not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. Very interesting. Let's hit pause. We will return to it. That's the open brackets or one bookend. And we'll get to the closed brackets and the other bookend in a moment. But let's have the sandwich filler in between. On reaching Jerusalem, he gets there eventually. He's cursed the fig tree. He gets to Jerusalem. Jesus enters the temple courts. He began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers, the benches of those selling doves. He would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. As he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they had feared him, because the crowd were amazed at his teaching. So, after this destructive words that Jesus curses a fig tree, he now comes into the temple courts and he begins an act of destruction, which is the second time that he's done what he does. If we read in John chapter 2, we learn 2 years before a very similar thing happens, where he goes to the same place and the same activity is going on within the temple courts in that place, and he does the same thing. Now, what are the temple courts? They're not courts in terms of going to court, they're courtyards courts. And there's different ones for different people. There's a court for men, there's a court for women, there's a court for the religious leaders, and then there's a court of Gentiles. Gentiles means anyone else that's not Jewish. And it's in the temple courts that all this trading is going on. All of this buying and selling of goods, merchandise, of food, and then all of the different animals. In this passage it mentions doves, but in the other gospel accounts we learn of other animals which are purchased for the sake of sacrifice of their own sins. And they'd purchase a sacrifice, it would be brought to the temple, it would be slain to pay penance for their own sin. And we read in this chapter that Jesus, again, like he did in John chapter 2, goes a bit nuts. He's pretty upset. And in John 2, we learn that he takes a whip. We don't know this time round, but possibly, and if we watch The Chosen, we'll see that he has a whip. And in so doing, he begins to clear away the temple sellers. Why is he so angry? We find it in the words that he says here. He says, "My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it into a den of robbers." Note 2 things. He uses the word my house. In John 2, the first time round, he says my Father's house, but in this time round, he refers to it as my house is a house of prayer. It is a place of worship. But you, and he's speaking to the sellers and everyone who's cashing in on it, but he's also saying it to the religious leaders, because they are ultimately the ones responsible and they are the ones in charge He says, you, instead of it being a house of prayer, you have made it into a den of robbers. The temple was the place of worship, the place where the Ark of the Covenant resides, the place where his presence was most tangible, in behind the veil, the curtain which was soon to be torn in two, contained in the Holy of Holies within the temple. This was a place of pilgrimage for pilgrims to come to be a place of worship where they would get right with God through their sacrifice in the presence of God. But the leaders had acted irresponsibly, and they had acted in such a way that they had benefited financially from it because they'd made it into a den of robbers. How had they done that? 3 ways. Pilgrims who'd come had to fulfill what was called the temple tax. It was half a shekel. And those coming from far and wide, from different nationalities, would have come with different currencies, a bit like we have. We go to a different country, we need their currency, and so we have to exchange currencies, and it is very, very similar. If you're coming with Roman or Greek currency, it would need to be exchanged into Tyrian shekels. And usually, it could only be done there. You couldn't go to the post office beforehand and get a rate, or you couldn't do it online. They didn't have Revolut or any of that stuff. So you had to make the exchange rate there and then in the temple. And of course, they did it at an exchange rate which was extortionate. And they ripped them off. And that was the first way. And again, the Jewish leaders themselves would have profited from this. On top of that, those traveling from far and wide could not have brought their own animal for sacrifice. You couldn't have walked a lamb 100 miles. So you had to buy your animal or whatever it was for sacrifice when you got there. And again, you can bet your bottom dollar they were going to charge at a higher rate. Sometimes it was reported as much as 15 times the actual value. It's a bit like going to the airport, isn't it? You know, you're going to have to buy the stuff that's there. You can't really go anywhere else. And then lastly, those who were fortunate enough to bring their own animal from outside of the city into the city had to fulfill an inspection of their animal. And there were fees attached to that. And invariably, the priests or the temple officials looked at the animal and they were like, that hasn't made the grade. When really it had, forcing them to then actually purchase a more expensive one there. So there were 3 ways in which they were ripping them off. And historical evidence suggests that the high priest, who we know as Annas or Aeneas, or I don't know how you pronounce the name, and his family, they controlled these markets and benefited directly from the high prophet. Jesus knew, he saw this. He said, this is a house of prayer. This is my house of prayer. And yet you, religious leaders, have made it into a den of robbers. God invites us to worship, to this place, to pray. He's given us, the church, the place, the people, and he is jealous. He is a jealous God. He only wants our worship that is right and is true and is pure and is holy. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves of the seriousness of that. And sometimes when we think something is right and something is holy and something seems to be the right thing, actually isn't and bears no fruit at all. And this really is a stark reminder and a healthy reminder that we don't enter into the presence of God when we come to worship lightly or flippantly. I love it that we dress down. I love that. God takes us as we are. But actually that wouldn't be the posture of our hearts. The posture of our hearts wouldn't be we give of ourselves and we give of our best. And we come in that way. Back to the fig tree. The closed brackets. That was the sandwich filler, but they relate. And Mark is very deliberate in his writing of this. Early in the morning, they come into town. He curses the fig tree. He goes to the temple. He clears the temple. And then they're on their way back. They're on their way out of Jerusalem back to Bethany. We read this. Evening came, end of the day. Jesus' disciples, they went out of the city. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Have faith in God, Jesus answered. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins. He curses the fig tree for not having any fruit, and it is symbolic. He visits the temple, drives out the traders. He then returns the next day, and they see that this tree that he cursed with his words has now withered, and no fruit will come from it. What's it all about? What does it mean? Got a great video for you to watch. There's so many videos I could have shown you. In fact, we could have watched about an episode and a half of a program, but we've got a 2 or 3 minute clip. You'll enjoy this.
There's so much going on, I've barely thought to eat. Did you bring any food?
We figured there'd be plenty at the House of Lazarus. Mary and Martha seem to keep the kitchen well stocked.
No matter. God's given us a fig tree.
It's not the season for figs.
Rabbi, are you sure this trip is necessary? Why Bethany? Time is of the essence. We're wasting time.
May no fruit ever come from you again!
Rabbi, look. Oh, the fig tree you cursed withered overnight.
Peter, you've seen me walk on water. And you're astonished by this?
I don't know. Gets me every time.
Listen carefully. I know you're confused about why I would curse the fig tree. Yes, Nathaniel?
Of course.
Have faith. You've heard many of our rabbis talk about moving mountains. Obstacles or impossible situations that get in our way of pursuing or trusting God. And truly, whoever says to this mountain right here, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, it will be done for him. Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours.
Sounds great.
You need to understand that as you face mountains the rest of your life. But I didn't just do this to the tree to prove I can do anything. Why else did I curse this tree? Philip?
Did not bear fruit.
But as John pointed out yesterday, it wasn't in season anyway. What was I expecting?
There were leaves.
Very good, Andrew. It's not in full season. But fruit usually comes before or along with leaves. Leaves promise fruit, even if just the beginning of growth. And there was nothing. This tree gave the appearance of fruit, but lacked anything good. Does that remind you of anything?
The temple.
I destroyed the marketplace in the temple. and cursed the leaders there for the same reason as this tree. I'm here to tear down what isn't bearing fruit. And the time for that is now.
Wonderful. Happens in the middle. The appearance of the temple was what they all thought, but Jesus knew it wasn't bearing any fruit. He sees the tree. Yes, it has leaves. It's the period, it's the season before fruitfulness. And there's an anticipation of fruit. But he does it symbolically to show and to describe the temple. The temple was a place where it should have been bearing fruit. But Jesus cursed the leaders as he cursed the tree because there was no fruitfulness there. And Jesus invites us where there's things in our lives that are bearing no fruit to shut that stuff away. And Jesus in John 15, as we read, is when we, if we remain in the vine, we will bear much fruit. And it's this invitation as Jesus invites his disciples, and he invites us still today, is to be fruitful with our lives. And anything that isn't, he wishes to remove that from us. And he invites us to lay those things down. One of the wonderful things that I heard through stories over this past 24 hours away with the guys was this laying stuff down, resting at the side. I choose this. One of the gentlemen said to me something that he just felt really clear God had spoken to him about was, put your phone away. Put your phone away. That was it. It's wonderful. Jesus invites us to be fruitful with our lives. He curses the tree, cursed the temple and those that were leading it because it was bearing no fruit. Jesus in John 2 says this. He says, Jesus answered them, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. They replied, it's taken 46 years to build this temple and you're going to raise it in 3 days? But the temple he had spoken was his body. And after he was raised from the dead, the disciples remembered. They believed the scriptures and the words that he'd spoken. Jesus himself replaced the temple. He replaced it. We don't have to journey to Jerusalem where his presence is, because his presence is here. And his presence is here. And we invite his presence, because it's his presence that changes us. Again, going back the last day or so, his presence was with us in such a strong, powerful way. And we need his presence. If we don't have your presence, do not send us up from this place. I can't go do the life that God wants me to do without his presence. I will screw it up. And so will you. We need his presence in our lives.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website, carrickfergusvineyard.org.